Hypocrisy. So we're talking. So we only have 2 more lessons. Today we're going to talk about hypocrisy. And then next week we're going to talk about the problem of Jesus and the major objections people have on the historical person of Jesus and what he may or may not have accomplished in his life and death and resurrection. But today we're talking about hypocrisy. So in 2007, a research organization called Barna Research and Statistics, their organization, they surveyed thousands upon thousands of people, Christian, non-Christian, and they kind of released the results. So they released a study where they interviewed 10,000 non-believers, non-Christians specifically, asking them why they were not believers. And some of the major reason. And then they were given a list of words, and they kind of chose which words they liked. And then 3 primary words rose to the surface of why people who are not Christian are not Christian. And whenever this study was released, people were blown away because the results, like the reasoning, was not evidential reasons. So it wasn't like the things we've been talking about where it's like, well, God, I don't know if God exists, or if the Bible is, the validity of the Bible, or if Jesus really is the Son of God. Like, it wasn't things that you can prove or not prove, or factual or historical. It was moralistic reasons that they chose not to. So there's 3 words that kind of bubble to the surface in this survey. 3 reasons why. Number 1, Christians, they believe, are judgmental. So they have a certain standard of life and the way they think other people should live, and they have a slitted, narrow view of how they view people, and they judge or condemn people because they don't fit their standard, right? We're not talking about that tonight. We're actually talking about that on Sunday. I'll be preaching about judging and judgment, and I'll bring up the study again. So we'll talk about that on Sunday. The next one is what we will be talking about, the second word, that Christians are hypocrites, right? So they have a standard that they expect other people to live by, but they themselves do not live by that standard, according to the 10,000 people that they surveyed. And then the third one, so that's what we're talking about tonight, and the third one is that they're anti-gay, right? So there is a specific group of people who receive condemnation and judgment from Christians of a standard of life, right? That we're not talking about that at all tonight. That's for a completely different subject, a different day. So today we're going to talk about the problem of hypocrisy, because why would anybody want to be a part of a faith that's full of bigots, hateful, judgmental hypocrites, right? So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to move through 7 movements. I've kind of broken tonight up into 7 major parts, both dealing with how do we handle this issue, like what's our response, but also what the people who are viewing us as Christians, what they have to also wrestle with as well. So it's just 7 movements we're going to work through. Hopefully we'll have an answer by the end of it. So let's just dive in. The very first one is we have to, the very first step is admitting it, right? So some of the charges against Christianity are absolutely true. And we have to stop living within a personal ecosystem that says that I am not capable of making bad decisions, because I am, and you are, and Christians all over the globe, all throughout history, are all susceptible to making bad decisions and living hypocritical lives. And sometimes we don't even realize it or want to. For example, yesterday, my oldest was in the bathroom with my youngest. They were brushing teeth, and my oldest, he can't do something, and he kind of gives like a whining voice, like, I can't do that. And I'm walking by the bathroom, and I just I kind of mock him. And I'm trying to tell him, whining doesn't get you anything. Fix the problem, talk normal while you do it, right? But he comes out of the bathroom, and he's like, Mr. P, you're a hypocrite. He's like, you tell me not to make fun of K3 all the time, and you're making fun of me. And I'm like, dude, you're right. I am a hypocrite, right? And that's a small example, but sometimes we do it and we have good intentions or whatever, but we make mistakes too, because we're human. And we have to be willing to realize that. And this is especially true when religion becomes systematized, institutionalized, politicalized, whenever it becomes an organization, right? The church is no longer like this small group of people that meet here. It is a national thing. And so when a church wherever makes a decision, it impacts us here, right? So it creeps in, makes... so the real first issue is we have to admit that we make mistakes and we're susceptible to mistakes. So Donald Miller, he's a Christian author. He, in one of his books it's called Blue Like Jazz. Highly recommend the book. But he tells a story about how he and his friends, they were on a liberal campus. They were going to school there. And they set up a confessional booth in the middle of the student square there. And it was open for anybody who wanted to come in and confess. But the trick was, or the flip was, when people came in to confess whatever they were confessing, they were surprised to hear Donald and his friends actually confessing to them. So they were confessing and repenting of the pain that Christianity might have caused that person, for the mistreatment of the church, for their take on homosexuality and women and the likes. They took a posture, in this small example, of Jesus. Right? This is the model Jesus has given us. Repent. Like, be willing to recognize my mistakes and turn away from my own injustices and my own mistakes and my own sin and seek to pursue Jesus. And that's something right at the beginning that we as Christians, we have to be willing to do. To admit that, yes, I mess up. Yes, I can be hypocritical sometimes, but I'm seeking to do the right thing in my pursuit of Jesus. Right? Another truth, the second one that we have to recognize, is that the church is filled with fake disciples. So the church is filled with people who are not actually Christians. They may look like Christians or act, or no, may not act, may do all the things that Christians do, but they don't actually live as a Christian. I remember I was in high school. I just started going to this church. I was new to the faith, didn't really know. I kind of had an idea what following Jesus meant, but I was just beginning to practice it. And I'm sitting in this room, and there was this other kid that was in the same grade as me, and he was in this class with me, and this kid has a sailor's mouth. Like, in church, like not on the football field or like, at the movie theater, like in church, like our teacher would like step out of the classroom and he would just like, boom, go off. So I remember one time we were sitting in there and the teacher was gone. I don't know what they were doing. And this guy just like, F this, that word over here, you can't believe this. And I stand up, and everybody's like, oh, fight in church, here we go. Like I don't know what I'm going to do, but I stand up, and I go to the door, and I open it, and I make this guy leave. I kicked a guy out of church. It's like the only time I've ever done it. But I was like, you can't be this way and say that you're a follower of Jesus, right? There are fake disciples in churches all over the place. And this is different than fake teachers. We're not talking about somebody who's in a position of authority and is spinning theology or spinning doctrine to meet their own personal agenda. We're talking about people who go to church and are broken, just like we all are, but have no desire to actually pursue Jesus for themselves. They take on kind of an exoskeleton. They adopt an exoskeleton, and maybe they come to church every Sunday. Maybe they don't say bad words. Maybe they don't watch bad movies. Maybe they tithe every week, but they also have just picked up religious practices. They're not actually pursuing Jesus. And Jesus had pretty strong language for people like that. For people who weren't actually pursuing a relationship with Jesus, they were just kind of fooling themselves and getting by. He compared them to like hot tea and a cold beverage, and you're neither. You're just lukewarm in my mouth, and I'll spit you out. And there will come a time whenever you approach Jesus, and he's going to say, I never knew you because you never knew me, right? So statistically, and this is whenever we get to, okay, but is that really true? Like, are there really that many people in our churches that say they're Christian but aren't Christian? So statistically, there is no difference between Christians and non-Christians in 10 major areas: gambling, visiting porn sites, stealing, talking behind people's back, consulting a psychic, fighting or abuse, using illegal drugs, lying, and drunkenness. People who are of the world and people who claim to be followers of Jesus are statistically more susceptible to do all of these things. In fact, there's only one statistic, major statistic, that is a difference between people of the secular world and people of the Christian faith, and it's that Christians statistically don't recycle more. Like, they recycle less statistically than people of the world. So that's one of the major differences between them. Otherwise, there is no major difference. That is a problem, right? That's a problem. And so the world looks in and they say, you know what, my Christian neighbor is no different than my neighbor on the other side, really. They have the same problems, right? And it's beyond just brokenness. They have no pursuit of doing what is right. It's why James, the brother of Jesus, said faith without works is dead, right? He said, you can say you believe anything you want, and you could be fully convinced of it, but until your works, until your deeds actually show you believe it, it's not actually true. Like, I could say I love my wife until I'm blue in the face, but if I go home and hit her, right, my actions don't show that I truly do love her, right? And this is why God said to Paul, or God said through Paul, that, you know, if you focus on me, your actions are gonna resemble this list: love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's the list to live by. It's a list that should encompass who we are. It should be our definition. When the world looks at us, this is what they should see. But the problem, statistically, it's not. We're just as broken as the rest of the world, only we say we're following, and we say we're following Jesus. We wake up on Sunday morning, we give to a building, but our life isn't actually that different. So the church is filled with fake disciples, not actual followers of Jesus. Number 3, the church is a place for sinners, though. So we have to balance these two, because while there is a whole group of people who aren't actually trying to pursue Jesus, there is a whole group that is, right? So the message of the gospel, if you want to know what the gospel message is, you have to hear what I'm about to say right now. The message of the gospel is not about making bad people into good people. That is not the purpose of the gospel. That's not the purpose of following Jesus. And if you think that that is the mission of the church, somebody has misled you along the way. The mission of the church, the gospel, Christian never equals a good person. Rather, Christianity, being a Christian, equals a bad person who is redeemed by a good person. We are never good in and of ourselves. Jesus lived a perfect life simply because we could not. And the church is filled with a bunch of messy people who are not good in and of themselves. And this is the major difference that you'll find in, if you've ever heard the prosperity gospel, or if you've heard that language, this is that message. That message is that you, in and of yourself, you are good, and there's good traits about you, and if you just try hard enough, and push yourself hard enough, and organize your life well enough, you are good, and you will kind of shine through and break through those bonds, which sound awesome, but it blurs the line between what I'm able to do for myself and what I need Jesus to do for me. Because the more I'm able to accomplish and make myself good, the less I need Jesus in my life. The gospel is not bad people turning into good people. It's bad people who are redeemed and made good because of Jesus, not because of anything I accomplished. So the church is a place filled with sinners, filled with bad people, filled with people who are unable to do it on our own. The church is a hospital. It's not a country club. Right? And when I think of a country club, I think of a bunch of people. We get all dressed up and, the hors d'oeuvres, they don't taste good. Give me some more lemonade. This one has too much pulp in it. And I'm going to critique the cook because he's just not doing a good job and giving me everything I want all the time. Right? That's what we think of when we think of church, though. I come dressed up. It's a social club. I can complain whenever I don't like the lesson. I give whenever I'm feeling impacted. But if I'm not going to give. That's not what this is, though. The church is a hospital. It's people, it's a place of brokenness, and it relies on a great physician. Imagine whenever you walk into a hospital, you don't say, hey, my arm is cut off. I just need to come and hang out here for a little bit before my life gets turned around, and then I can do it on my own. I just kind of need to hang out in this space, and then I'll go. No, you come in and say, I need somebody other than me to save me from my problems. I need somebody who has expertise beyond me who can actually redeem me and save me, right? That's what we're looking for with the great physician. So the church is just as susceptible, but it's filled with people who recognize I can't do it on my own, I need Jesus, and are actually trying to pursue that. So the church is a place for sinners. And so when the world looks in and says it's filled with hypocrites, it's like, well, yeah, you're right. There are a bunch of people who make mistakes in there, but they're relying on Jesus and they're focused on him. Okay, here's a big one. This is where a large part of the hypocrite language comes from, and it's a myth of Christianity's violent past. Right? So if you've ever heard of the Crusades or the religious wars, right, this often comes in the conversation, right? And it's a very misleading title. So it is true that European nations were fighting various wars, and they were fought under a Christian banner. The difference, though, from what you hear, is that while they were fighting under a Christian banner, they were not fighting for religious purposes. And these were complex geopolitical wars with Muslim nations, and the battles were not for the advancement of the kingdom of God. That was not their purpose. It was not for a heartfelt conversion of people that they were fighting against. This was for the expansion of the European nation, right? And they cloaked themselves under the Christian banner, justify themselves because the rulers became primarily Christian, and it's just, the methods they went through. But this was not a religious war. This was a war that people who say they were Christian fought in and expanded through. And so we have to do what Alistair McGrath, he's an Oxford historian, he said one of the greatest tasks confronting the church today is we have to rescue Christianity from misunderstanding. And this is one of those moments where people have understood, the Crusades and the violence, and look what the church did, and they killed so many people, and it was for selfish reasons, but that's not at all what was happening. It was a whole other geopolitical thing that was bannered under the Christian faith, and it was all for political power. And if you know anything about Jesus, and if you study Jesus at all, if you study his life, and you see his ultimate sacrifice at the end of it, you can never come to the conclusion that killing people for the possession of political power is ever something that Jesus would promote. You can never come to that conclusion. And in fact, and this is kind of the irony, but also the scary part, Christianity actually thrives within persecution and low economic status, like locations. So the minute that Christianity steps into a position of power, Christianity flees from that moment. So you can think of like Rome, when Constantine made Christianity was thriving. It went from a small group of people who were persecuted and killed and believed they saw a Messiah. You're talking like 400 people to an entire nation of people, right? In just a few hundred years, it advanced this much because it was illegal and it was wrong and people were being killed for it. But then Constantine, Roman Empire, he became a Christian, made it legal, and all of a sudden Christianity was out of there. Then you have wars like this and the span of European nation, and it's why today, nations like China and Africa, the Christian population is booming there because people are being persecuted there. And it's why here in America, it's dying. Because it's legal, because everybody's a Christian and nobody is at the same time. And then that's the next question. So then the final thing is like the witch hunts. Like they're another area that people point to, like, look at this, look what Christians did. Carl Sagan, he was a American scientist. He said that nobody knows how many supposed witches the church killed altogether. And then get this. He said perhaps hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions. And it's like, dude, that's a big difference. Like 100,000 people or 1 million people, that's a big range. And the scary thing is that Carl Sagan didn't get that from anything historical. He just literally pulled that number he didn't quote or source himself. He just pulled that number out of thin air. It's likely the number is closer to 40,000 to 60,000. Doesn't make any better, but it does help us not to save Christianity from misunderstanding of the inflated number. And even with like the Salem witch trials, I think it was literally like a handful of people, like 40, 50 people. Doesn't make it right, Souls are still lost, but it's a far cry from the number inflated by Sagan and others. So we have to rescue and save Christianity from the myths of history. Does religion actually poison everything? So this is from atheist Christopher Hitchens. This is reason number 5. He contends that religion actually poisons everything it touches. And that if we want to remove all of the violence and hatred that exists in the world, the simple solution is to remove any divisive reason that people kill each other is to remove Christianity. Like, he believes atheism is the answer, which, if you look at the flip side of that, that means he believes all of the violence and anger and killing and whatnot exists because of Christianity. Don't understand where he gets his reasoning from. But the problem is, and the problem with his theory, and what he says, and this is a smart dude. I mean, Christopher Hitchens is not, he knows his stuff. The problem is that Christianity places God at the pinnacle of society. It is the place where we get all of our truth. It is the place where we point all of our reasoning, where we get our meaning for life. It's the direction that we move as a people group, right? If you remove God from that equation, you do not remove the problem. What you do is you just simply replace God with another ideology or another practice or another thought or another god or gods. Like, you just replace that arrow with something else, right? So for Sigmund Freud, he replaced God with sex. Like, sex is the ultimate freeing thing, and we should all just kind of point ourselves to that. Marx replaced God with the state. Hitler replaced God with an atheistic and anti-Semitic regime, right? But it still was these are our principles. These are our values. So you cannot remove yourselves. And here's some numbers for you. From atheistic, this is the atheistic model that Christopher Hitchens believes is the solution to all of the violence and hatred that exists in the world. Hitler killed 6 million Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals. I didn't mean to click anything. The Khmer Rouge killed 2 million of their own people. Stalin killed 20 million through mass slayings and labor camps. Mayo exterminated 50 to 70 million of his own kind, right? And so by the same criteria that atheists used against us in the Christian faith, all atheists today have to bear the responsibility of those trillions of people who lost their lives. If we hold them to the same standard that they hold to us, right, that we are responsible for the deaths, doesn't matter how inflated or real they are, we're held responsible, then they are also held responsible for theirs. And we would agree that's unreasonable, right? It's unreasonable to hold that a practice and a principle, right, that the history of it fully defines the people today. That Christopher Hitchens is a murderer and a terrible person because atheists have killed people for millions of years. No, we don't believe that. So we as Christians should not hold ourselves to that same ideology and thought practice either. So what is fair is to discuss the values that Christianity actually promotes and what we actually witness from people who are truly trying to live Jesus' standard of life and love. So Christianity holds that all people are made in the image of God, that all people are worthy and have dignity simply because they are human. It doesn't matter how strong or weak they are, doesn't matter how disabled they are, doesn't matter how unborn they are, they all have value. And because of Christianity, we have hospitals in some of the poorest nations around the world. Because of Christianity, slavery was overruled in our free country. Because of Christianity, orphans around the world have been taken care of. Like, there's a lot of good that Christianity has done, and it fits the models that we've seen of who Jesus actually was and what happens when people actually pursue him. And so the idea that religion is poison and that atheism is the answer, history shows that's not true. And so we also can't be held to the same criteria that the tainted past of Christianity, wherever it is, from mistaken people, that doesn't define the followers, and the moral decisions of the followers does not define who Jesus was and what he actually came to do. So number 6, do we ditch truth and grab power? So there's a claim out there that being a dogmatic person is dangerous. Here's what I mean by that. That being dogmatic is holding on to absolute truths, right? So we hold, as Christian, an absolute truth. That there is something that is actually true in the world, like murder is bad, and we understand that truth because God has established all human life is good, and we have no right to take it from somebody, right? And so there's a belief system that belief in absolute truth is oppressive and destructive, and there's a whole movement of people who are fighting against absolute truths in the world. And their purpose is they want everybody to believe that what's true for you is true for you, and what's true for me is true for me. Right? We've talked about this before in this session. So Sigmund Freud is one of the major proponents of this ideology, one that our modern world is really picking up and running with these days. Like if you go on social media, if you have conversations with your neighbors, they will say something like this. Our neighbor has said something like this to me before. Like, you just do you. Like, your truth is your truth. It's like, no, that's not how truth works, right? And Sigmund Freud, this is where they're getting it from. Like, he argued that all truth claims are the result of guilt and insecurity. All truth claims are a result of guilt and insecurity. So he claims that any statement about a belief in God, it has to be abandoned, right? Because it's just attached to guilt and insecurity and whatnot. But the problem is that Freud is sawing off the limb that he's sitting on with that argument. Because based off of that reality, you can't trust what Freud is saying either, right? Like, by his own definition, his truth is that God doesn't exist. That's his truth. And that must arise from Freud's own guilt and insecurity. Like, his unbelief in God, like, that is his truth, right? And you can just go around. I get hot. I was practicing earlier, and I was arguing with myself because I was hot, and I was like, you can't believe this. Like, not believing in an ultimate truth is by the definition holding on to an absolute truth. The idea that there is no truth is a truth for you. And you can't hold on to that to be true if you believe there are no truths. I know it's circled, but this is the problem. It's a problem with our world, right? And what it is, it's an ultimate grab for power, right? It's saying, I don't want you to be true, so I'm going to say what's true for me is true for me. And that's the ultimate power grab. By saying you're wrong because all truth is relevant and is just true for me, it's the ultimate power grab to say you can't touch me and my thoughts. Right? But Christians are the opposite of a power grab, or we should be, where we say, God, we give it all and fully to you. Not my will, but yours be done. We sacrifice my desires and my wants for something that is true beyond me. And I may not agree with it. I may not understand it. If we go back to the hell series or talk, right? I may not like it. I may not desire it. It may be repulsive to me. But I sacrifice it all to you, God. It's the ultimate release of power. And that's the posture we're supposed to take. Plus, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Christians believe there is an absolute truth. But here's the twist, right? Our truth is not an ideology. Our truth is not a principle. It's not even a religion. Our truth is a person. Our truth is found in a person who lived perfectly, who died perfectly, and who sacrificed himself for everybody who is unworthy of that sacrifice. And being a Christian is the ultimate sacrifice of power, and it's supposed to set an example. And we were given an example by someone who was made powerless for us, who submitted to the evils of the world so that we could be saved. That's the gospel message, and that's the model we're supposed to be following after. And then finally, number 7, this is the last one, trivial objections. This one's pretty simple, but I thought it was a pretty good one to end on because it's so simple, we could have just done this one and it would have been over. We can just get rid of this hypocrisy thing altogether. So at the end of the day, for somebody to say, I don't want to follow Christianity because of the history because of its history and its tainted history. I don't want to follow it because of that. Or I don't want to follow Christianity because its followers are terrible people. They're hypocrites, they're judgmental, they're anti-gay, whatever. I don't want to follow because the followers are so terrible. All of this falls under the definition of a trivial objection. So let me give you a familiar example. If I was to tell you that Albert Einstein was a kleptomaniac, we just discovered this. We found some old notebooks, and he's a kleptomaniac. He's crazy. So because of that, we are rejecting all of his mathematical and scientific discoveries. We're just rejecting it as not true because we found out something bad about Albert Einstein that we believe is not morally right. Doesn't make sense, right? You're all like, that has no connection, because that's what a trivial objection is, right? A trivial objection is focusing critical attention on a point less significant than the main point, right? So putting focus on followers of Jesus or putting focus on the history of the church is a trivial objection to what Jesus actually did. You can say his followers are crap all you want, and I might agree with you. But that still doesn't get past the fact that Jesus rose from the dead and he's the Lord and Savior of all. And it's not connected in any way. So, trivial objection to faith. This is a good, it's not a good objection, just to say history, all of this is bad. So, if you believe, this is my conclusion, if you believe that the church is filled with hypocrites, I agree with you. I agree with you. It is full of hypocrites. It's full of people who are not really Christian. It's full of people who are broken and make mistakes. It's filled with people just like me. I agree with you, but that doesn't mean Christianity isn't true, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think the fact that God has brought together a whole bunch of broken people actually points to the fact that it's working. Because a bunch of broken people all over the world who come from different cultures and different systems of belief, they can all find some kind of unity that no other part in our world or existence has to offer. It's a unity found in one who died for all people. And it's a way of life that says broken people are welcome in this system, are welcome under this body, and our redemption is not found in ourselves. It's not found in what I'm able to accomplish. It's found in the one that I'm looking to, which is exactly what we're going to talk about next week. Because if you can tear down the resurrection of Jesus, that if you can prove that he's just a regular person, boom, you won. You've won the debate. You're right. We all go home. One less Jesus, like one less Christian, one less faith, right? That's how sturdy that the resurrection of Jesus has to be. So we're not looking at the followers. We're not looking at the history. Hypocritical, yes, I agree with you. Good, bad, ugly, it's all there. But none of that matters if Jesus really did raise from the dead. So we have to talk about that first before anything else. And that's what we're going to talk about next week with the problem of Jesus.